Welcome to your LSU Football Fix. I'm Preston Guy, staff writer, TigerBait.com. Today's show is presented by oh man, they're not going to be happy about that little stutter, are they? Tremonti's Meat and Seafood. Oh man, that's loud. So, anyways, man, we're having all sorts of technical errors tonight, but that is okay because I don't care. LSU got the guy. It's over. They hired a coach, y'all. And it has been a long 72 hours with melts, panics, heartbreaks, everything you could imagine under the sun. If you watch this show often, you know we prepare a lot of graphics and film reviews and guests and things of that nature. And I just want to say tonight's show is going to be a little bit different. I do have a guest. And I honestly look at this as the perfect guest. But I don't have much else outside of the guest. Today's guest is Brian Driscoll of Notre Dame Sports Illustrated. He was a former coach, receivers and quarterbacks coach at the collegiate level. Of course, smaller schools, but he's going to know football X's and O's very well. My thing I kept on pushing about this LSU coaching search was I wanted a guy who can call offense and defense. I wanted somebody with coordinator experience. Of course, Brian Kelly has been a head coach for 30 plus years. Let's put it like this. He became a head coach before Zach von Rosenberg was born. Man, that's old. But can he call plays himself? Does he know offense? Does he know defense? Well, he was a coordinator for a handful of years. I'm interested to talk to Brian to see what style of offense Notre Dame runs, because in full disclosure, I've not had time to go back and study Notre Dame's film. It's my understanding that they run a spread system that incorporates the tight end quite a bit, and they do have a power running element. It's not going to be a Les Miles toss dive I formation by any stretch of the imagination. It's not going to be, this fancy Oregon Rich Rod style spread attack either. But today's show is mostly to hear from you. When I saw the hire, my reaction was that's a pretty darn good hire. The more I've seen it, the more I've researched it, the more I'm blown away by the hire, truth be told. So kudos to Scott Woodward and the LSU administration for getting it right, doing their homework, and pulling in a stud. I'm going to go over a few reasons why I think he is a good hire. A few reasons why, and I'm going to compare him to Lincoln Riley, and hopefully we're going to get Brian in here, and we're going to talk about what style of football, what style of offense, and a few other things about Notre Dame, because he's allegedly bringing an offensive line coach with him. He's allegedly bringing offensive coordinator Tommy Rees with him. He's allegedly bringing a strength and conditioning coordinator with him. There's a lot to know, and the Notre Dame fans know a lot more about what LSU is getting than LSU fans do, but I was shocked when I did my Twitter poll. I said, what do you grade the higher, A, B, C, or D, or below? And 93% gave it a B or an A. So it's pretty concrete among LSU fans. Now, I've heard a few very vocal minorities who are against the hire, but they've been few and far between, truth be told. So I'm going to get to a bunch of your comments. If anybody thinks it's a bad hire, I really want you to chime in, because like I said, there hasn't been that many people to criticize the hire. I'll give my cons, of course, and I'm still researching a few other issues that could be issues, but we'll see. But ultimately, LSU just hired the winningest active college football coach. He has 2 Division II national titles, 3 playoff appearances if you include the 1 national title appearances in 2012. He's won at every destination he's been at. He's built the program up. People were very impressed by Lincoln Riley's 55-10 record at Oklahoma over the past 5 seasons. Of course, some high offensive rankings and, Heisman Trophy winners mixed in there, but ultimately it was a very high win percentage at about 850. Well, one thing I didn't know until they pulled in Brian Kelly is during that same stretch, Brian Kelly is actually 54-10. 54 and a 9, which is a higher win percentage than Lincoln Riley during that same time span. Now, I get but he played for Notre Dame. Notre Dame's an independent. They don't play anybody. Well, check this out. This year, he beat number 18 Wisconsin. Of course, he also played Cincinnati this year and lost. But he's also beaten last year. He beat number 1 Clemson, number 19 North Carolina. And bear in mind, in 2020, Notre Dame played in the ACC as an ACC member. He's also beaten number 18 Virginia, number 23 Navy, number 12 Syracuse, number 24 Virginia, number 7 Stanford, number 14 Michigan, number 17 LSU in a bowl game, number 14 NC State, and number 11 USC during that 5-year stretch. So that's a substantial number of teams that he's beaten that were ranked at the time they played. Of his losses, his 9 losses, if you want to include Cincinnati as a playoff team, which I'm going to go ahead and do because I have a high level of confidence Cincinnati will be a playoff team. 5 of those losses, of his 9, 5 of them have been to playoff teams that went on to go to the playoffs. That is stunning. You want consistency at your program? Check this out. During that 5-year stretch, undefeated against unranked teams. He didn't lose to a single team that wasn't ranked in the last 5 years. Now, you might say that's a bit of an expectation, but that's kind of the point. His teams played, they weren't playing up to their or down to their competition. They were playing to their competition. Now, you've been watching this show, I've been pushing Lincoln Riley really hard. I thought he was a fantastic coach. I still think he's a fantastic coach. But here's the deal. If an easier path to the playoffs is something that's even slightly appealing to you, LSU is not the job for you. You cannot run from the smoke at LSU. You will play Alabama. You will play Georgia. You will play all these teams before you get to the playoffs. At LSU, if you make it to the playoffs, your path is probably easier before you get there. Because quite frankly, you went through the best teams in the country and knocked them out of the playoffs already. I assume that to be a high enough competitor to get the LSU job, you're not afraid of competition like that. You embrace it. You can't want this LSU job, but then think, oh God, I don't want to play Nick Saban every year. No, man, a true competitor, which is what is genuinely required for this job. A genuine competitor says, yo, I get to play Nick Saban in Alabama every single year. I get my shot at the king. And you have to embrace that challenge. It's important to get a top-notch coach, but it's more important to get somebody who's willing to play with the big boys. And LSU got just that with Brian Kelly. Also got him at a steal. 10 years, $95 million. I made a fun comparison on Twitter earlier that LSU just hired a coach for $100 million and the whole Louisiana purchase was $15 million. So it seems like a big chunk of change, especially in that, flawed, goofy comparison. But bear in mind, that's basically what Michigan State just gave Mel Tucker, who's been a head coach for 3 years. Brian Kelly's won 300 football games, y'all. Winningest active college football coach. That is no small deal. So I'm going to get to your comments. Before I do, I want to thank my sponsor tonight, Tremonti's Meat and Seafood. They have this awesome Heaven's Door single barrel staff selected whiskey, straight bourbon whiskey they're doing in their store. It even has on the name there, Tremonti's Private Select. It's good stuff. Me and Mark Scarborough cracked open and got our celebratory shot last night on air and shared it with you, the fans, because of how extraordinary we thought this Brian Kelly hire was. And by the way, nationally, it's been really well received. I mean, very well received. I mean, Colin Cowherd, who has not been a great friend to LSU over the years, came out and said LSU should compete for a national title next year. Mike Scarborough, who's coming on right after me, by the way, y'all stick around because at 8:00 he's going live with Buddy Sonji and at the other TigerBait main studio. He believes the ceiling is 8-4 next year. I don't believe that for a second because ceiling implies everything went right. And if everything goes right for this team, Derek Stingley comes back. Now, I recognize that that's very unrealistic, but we're talking about the ceiling. Now, what is more realistic is Eli Ricks were to pull his name out of the transfer portal and LSU gets his recruiting class in line and gets a couple big names in the transfer portal. I very easily could see LSU being a 10-win team next year. Now, that's not the expectation. That's unreasonable. If you're an LSU fan, this is his first year on the job, and understand that while LSU's recruited very well, there's just some problems with the roster right now. I mean, they had 60 players just out now. Got to get those players healthy. Got to get more players recruited. Offensive line needs a major rebuilding. Max Johnson needs a quarterback mentor. That's some work. So look, I would say set the expectation at 7-5 and 6-6 be okay with. Like don't run him out of town. Worse than 6-6, he probably should deserve some criticism if you're 5-5 next year. But don't be surprised if LSU wins some football games next year. I mean, 10 wins is not unrealistic. So anyways, want to thank my sponsor, Tremonti's. Don't forget to pop into Tremonti's off of Old Jefferson next to Parkview Baptist. They've got 30 kinds of meats and sausage. They are doing game processing. If you're a hunter, it is hunting season, deer season. So go out there and do your game processing. They have ribeye rolls, shrimp rolls that you can prefabricated with cream cheese, jalapeno, wrapped in bacon. You slap it on the grill. It's going to taste incredible. They have Chairman's Reserve Wagyu beef. If you're looking to impress someone, you're not going to do any better than a Tremonti's Chairman's Reserve Wagyu beef. I assure you. Lunch Deli is open daily till about 3:00. So if you want to pop in, get a burger, ribeye po' boy. People have ranted about that ribeye po' boy on this show. So y'all pop in. They do catering. And you will impress for whatever event if you do catering there. Give them a call, 225-751-7665, or visit Tremonti's.com.
Tremonti's has meat. Tremonti's has seafood. Tremonti's has much more. Tailgating and home gating platters. Huge wine and liquor selection. Beer and all the spices you need. Chairman Reserve and Wagyu meats. Ribeye rolls, shrimp rolls, kebabs. 20 flavors of sausage for the grill. Daily lunch specials and game processing. On-site catering also available. Good meat ain't cheap and cheap meat ain't good. Visit Tremonti's.com.
All right, good stuff. KO, a general is what we need. Well, maybe so. I think he is absolutely the grown-up in the room. Very fitting of the term general. Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons we bemoaned Lane Kiffin was because LSU's tired of cartoon characters. They didn't get one. They got a grown man ready to run this program, and I think that's a good thing. Great hire all the way around. That's Keaton Berrien. Thank you. I agree. Man is recording. Hush, man. Hush. We got a new update to the studio. Let's see here. Ed left Brian. Not sure what he's talking about. Big Brian Kelly with a Bulger. Oh, okay. So he's basically saying that Ed Ogeron left Brian Kelly with a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent, but there's also a lot of holes. Brian Kelly's going to have to get to recruiting on offensive line immediately. There's 4 players committed on the offensive line right now. You got to go get at least 1 or 2 more. A+ hire, baby. That's Ultimate Warrior. Cool. I agree. A+ hire. I just got a text from Brian Driscoll. He'll be in just a bit. Let's see here. Lincoln Riley was coming to the SEC in 2 years. Instead, he opted out to join the so powerful Pac-12. Champions don't run, but embrace the next challenge. Go Tigers. Welcome to Baton Rouge, Coach Kelly. That's exactly what I was telling you, Nicholas. Look, if it is indeed true that the reason Lincoln Riley took the USC job was to avoid the SEC, I don't want any part of him at this program. That's not a fit for LSU. If you consider avoiding Alabama a positive, appealing to you, you are not fit to be the LSU football coach. Now, maybe there's other reasons. Reasons come to mind. He's a bit of a quarterback whisperer. California is a quarterback hotbed. Maybe he thinks that's the best place to go get your good quarterback. I don't know. But, maybe it was the money. I can't imagine it was that much more money than what like an LSU would offer. So if those are the reasons, I give him a pass. If it's to avoid the SEC, dude, get out of here. You don't belong. You got to be a competitor. You got to embrace it, man. You have to want to beat the hell out of Nick Saban to get this job and to do well at it. Let's see here. He was not my first choice, but I would give the hire a B+. And look, worth noting, I didn't talk about him a ton. And before Lincoln Riley pulled the move to SC, because to me, all the other factors don't really make sense. I think it's strictly to avoid the SEC is why he's doing it. And that bumps him down in my book. But I didn't know he was attainable. I memean, 7 days ago, he came out and said maybe there's a magic fairy with $250 million. But I didn't think he was attainable. So I give it at least a B+, if not A-. I did want someone who was an offensive mind, who knew X's and O's, but I don't know. We're gonna talk to Brian about that. I want to talk to Brian and figure out, can he call his own plays? Because ideally, you're not married to a head football coach for your scheme. That's the thing I did not like from Ed Orgeron from day one, is no matter what, you are always one bad coordinator hire away from 7-5 or 6-6, as we saw the last couple seasons. So that's just not okay at LSU. The LSU wants a higher level of consistency. Let's see here. In 31 years, he only finished under 500 twice. That's a great comment from Wayne Clark. That's exceptional, y'all. I mean, that's straight up fantastic. I mean, really. How did Lincoln Riley coming to LSU rumor get started? Nancy Sloan, great comment. I'm going to tell you this. I don't necessarily think it was just a rumor. I think there was something there. And I think agents, Trace Armstrong for Lincoln Riley, I think he pushed it a little harder to certain people, and certain people ran with it. And then everything just kind of made sense. It fit like a puzzle piece. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I think that LSU was genuinely interested in Lincoln Riley. Got a super chat from Will Piku. Odds Brian Kelly bringing Freeman. And that is the big question. Of course, reports are coming out that LSU plans to make him the highest paid coordinator in football. That's not new to LSU whatsoever. Of course, LSU can do that. So here's the deal. Marcus Freeman will probably get offered a head coaching football position, which we all know he wants. Probably Notre Dame's number one target will be Luke Fickell of Cincinnati. Midwest guy, probably makes a lot of sense. Of course, he's an incredible coach. He's a guy who I wouldn't have mind LSU getting. I wouldn't have even batted an eye at it. But can Notre Dame get him, especially in time for him to do his playoff run and all that good stuff? Their athletics director said they probably won't roll with an interim coach, which makes me kind of say, huh? How's that going to work? So we'll see. We'll see. You would assume the interim football coach would be Marcus Freeman there if they were to go with one. Doesn't really make sense to me. The only thing that makes sense to me for them not to do an interim coach is if they were to just promote Marcus Freeman straight up. I'd say Marcus Freeman's the front runner. most likely to get the Notre Dame job because Luke Fickell timing issues. I mean, Notre Dame could still potentially make it to the playoffs, y'all, especially if Notre Dame leapfrogs over Cincinnati. We'll see. If Cincinnati loses this week, Notre Dame will jump over them. So that could be highly interesting there. But even if Notre Dame were to hire Luke Fickell, Cincinnati would very likely then turn around and go hire Marcus Freeman as their head coach. So between Notre Dame and Cincinnati, I would expect Marcus Freeman will be the head coach at one, or if not the other. Now, I will tell you this. Let's say one of those schools leaves them at the altar and Notre Dame goes out and hires a young coach who's not named Marcus Freeman. Do I think Marcus Freeman's going to stick around at Notre Dame where he's going to have to coach under a younger guy and wait for him to retire or wait for another opportunity? I do think if he's going to be a coordinator, he will be a coordinator under Brian Kelly, who is 6 years old. It very likely Brian Kelly may coach for 5 years and call it quits. You don't want to coach under a young coach if you want to become a head coach. You want to coach under a guy who may retire, and you might be sitting there looking at yourself as the heir apparent of a blue blood like LSU. So that's it. I would say it's not very likely. But if he is a coordinator, I would say it's pretty likely he'll be a coordinator at LSU. That's my guess. Let's see here. 8-4. We could have been 9-3 this year. That's Jim Milano. Of course, Jim is on our show every single week and always drops some good commentary. And that's kind of where I got on Mike about it. I was like, man, even with all the roster issues and injuries and terrible season, I mean 8-4. I mean, LSU was just a few yards away from 8-4. I mean, we're talking that play against Texas A&M. If LSU pulls that off against Alabama, they beat Alabama. If they avoid an overtime interception at Arkansas, they beat Arkansas. So no, I don't think 8-4 is a ceiling at all. Do I think it's realistic for them to go beat Alabama next year? Probably not. I mean, that it's going to take him. He's not Superman. He's just a good football coach who knows how to win games. So we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Jim Milano. If they get a functional O-line, there's enough talent for 9 to 10 wins. Get them boys coached up. Exactly. I agree 100%. You think Howard or Johnson gets the start next year? That's Dylan Cole. Dylan Cole, great comment. Thank you. I believe we will see Max Johnson be the starter next year. And I base that off of Walker Howard does have a clean break in his leg. And, you know, he it's probably for the best to give him some time to sit and learn instead of being rushed out there and thrown into the swamp. You know, it's just give him some developmental time. Yes, he's an incredible quarterback. Is he a quarterback that just oozes raw, physical, freak athleticism that typically helps you get on the field earlier? Nah, he's 6'1". He's very much a Drew Brees type quarterback. He can scoot around a little bit, but he's not even really like a Joe Burrow. He's more of like a Danny Etling type scooter. I think LSU's got a great quarterback coming in him, but I would say next year, probably you're looking at your quarterback as Max Johnson with Nussmeier and Walker Howard fighting it out for the backup position. And either one of them as a backup quarterback, I'd feel very good about. Let's see here. Max deserves to start. I agree. I think Max has had a good season. I haven't looked at his final stats, but I imagine he ranks not too far behind Matt Mock's 28 touchdowns and Jamarcus Russell's 28 touchdowns, which would be second in school history. He's probably not too far off from that. I was reading SEC Nation of Notre Dame, and LSU is allegedly in a bidding war to get Tommy Rees. Yeah, absolutely. They're both fighting for Tommy Rees. Now, I'm going to be honest. I don't know much about Tommy Rees, the coordinator. He got promoted 2 years ago to coordinator. That's one thing I want Brian to come in and tell me about, because I haven't watched all of Notre Dame's football games. And there hasn't been enough time to study film. So I'm looking to get these answers as quickly as I can. But that's one of the reasons I'm bringing in an expert and someone who used to be a coach. He claims to be the best when it comes to coaching philosophy and scheme in the Notre Dame media. So do not go anywhere. You're going to want to hear from this guy. If you're at all concerned about the X's and O's of Tommy Rees or Brian Kelly or any of these guys, stick around. Don't go anywhere. By the way, if you're watching this, guys, please hit that like button for me. Mike Scarborough is, of course, always bullying me because he's like that. I don't know if you'll watch our show together, but we do tease each other a lot. Hit the like button so I can get more likes than him this week. I had my best show all football season last week, and he doubled me in views and likes. So y'all help me out. We're putting some effort into a quality show, some good guests, and we're trying our best here. Oh, would you look at that? With no further ado, Brian Driscoll. How are you doing, Brian?
Doing great. Busy, as I know you guys are. So
look, I'm gonna put us a little smaller here. Can you hear me at all?
I can, yes, sir.
Oh, there you are. Gotcha, man. Well, Brian, I'm sure the last 72 hours have been slow and boring and monotonous and just everybody is calm up there. Is that the case?
Hold on, let me check my phone. Is there something going on at Notre Dame? Oh, their rival hired Lincoln Riley. Oh no, you wanted to know about Notre Dame hiring, losing Brian Kelly. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's been a little busy couple days. So we had a lot to report on. We did a show on Lincoln Riley taking the USC job, which obviously for Notre Dame fans is pretty important. And then a day later, Brian Kelly leaves for LSU. That one didn't quite shock me quite as much as Lincoln Riley going to USC, but it was still obviously quite surprising.
I will say Lincoln Riley taking the USC job might have been the most shocking news I've ever seen as a football fan, because I consider USC a step down from, the talk was LSU, of course. I did 3 straight shows on Lincoln Riley here, and I consider USC a step down from OU and LSU. So to me, that just completely shocked me.
Yeah.
So tell me, what has been the fan reaction toward Brian Kelly? Are they angry? Are they freaking out? Like what's the mood around this?
I think it depends on what angle they were coming from to begin with. The fans that were kind of not big fans of Brian, there's a surprising number of Notre Dame fans, and I would kind of throw myself in that mix as an analyst, that been a little critical of Brian Kelly for someone who's put the record together that he's put together. That I think they're just kind of like, hey, look, it was time, right? It was Brian Kelly has brought this program from a dumpster fire for 20 years to the point where we're now upset that they went 11-1. Right. And we're not happy that 2 years ago they went 11-2 and lost to Michigan and Georgia. Right. Like that's the standard that he has raised the program to, where 11-1 and not in the playoff isn't good enough. Right. That's where you kind of want to be. Right. That's where a blue blood program should be. And so, but after 12 years, it's kind of like, okay, can he take that next step at Notre Dame? That was kind of the thing. And let's see if somebody else can. So I think that's the reaction from some. And then the people that were big time Brian Kelly fans and just loved him and he could do no wrong, they're the ones that are really upset, because I think they're just floored by it, because they just had convinced themselves that, that Brian Kelly was this Notre Dame lifer and he was going to be here till he retired. And, I don't, because like here, 12 years is a long time to be at Notre Dame, and he's still only 60. It's like, so who retires at like 60, barring some kind of certain situation, like kind of what Bob Stoops went through, where, his dad died at the same age he retired of a heart attack. He'd had other family. It was a completely unique situation. So I think it was, do I stay here and then retire earlier than I want to, or do I find a new challenge? I've taken Notre Dame as far as I can. It's time for a new challenge. And certainly LSU is a new challenge. And in a couple of years, that challenge gets even greater when you bring in, Oklahoma into the big SEC. You could maybe say Texas, but we'll see if Texas is any good ever by then. But, Oklahoma's going to be a challenge. And, we're going to find out what was it Brian Kelly that was holding Notre Dame back? Mm-hmm. Or was it Notre Dame that was holding Brian Kelly back? That's going to be a topic of our podcast tomorrow, but we'll find out next couple
What do you think there? Because to me, I look at it in Notre Dame. They were struggling for a good long period after Lou Holtz, And I understand that there was a few years that Brian Kelly's been down. He had 4-8, a couple 8-5 seasons, but man, you realize the last 5 years, Notre Dame's got a better record than Oklahoma.
Well, yeah, I mean, other than think Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, and Bama, I think are the only teams with a better record the last 5 years than Notre Dame. And I'm not even sure if Georgia's in there because they had that 8-5 in Kirby's first year. I'd have to go back and look at that. But, look, there's a couple different ways to look at it. One is, Brian Kelly has done a great job. Again, when you're a coach who is frustrating me during 11-1 season, you're doing a good job.
Right.
But here's the I'm trying to be as honest and objective as possible. In 2019, Notre Dame's best win that year, the only win they had over a ranked opponent was Navy. Right? They lost to Michigan and lost to Georgia. Now, the Georgia game was a competitive 4-quarter game where Notre Dame had the ball at the end with a chance to win and didn't get it done in Athens. That happens to a lot of people, right? That's a respectable win. This year, you look at Notre Dame, they're 11-1, and Notre Dame fans in the final weekend of the regular season are crossing their fingers hoping that 8-3 Wisconsin can beat Minnesota so that they have one win over a ranked opponent. Right now, they're 11-1, but they're with a ranked opponent. So you say, man, Brian Kelly, I think he's gone like 54-9 since the 2016 turnaround. But he's 13-9 against teams that were ranked, and he's 41-0 against teams that are unranked. So he's doing what he needs to do, but it's like, okay, but you're going to be facing a lot more of those ranked teams when you play in the SEC. And the other thing about LSU is not only are you playing against Alabama or not only playing against Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M and Arkansas now with Sam Pittman, but one thing we've talked about on our channel is we like to hammer Bama for their unwillingness to travel anywhere and play a road game against a team out of conference. And Florida, won't go above and play anybody. We've always praised LSU, Auburn, and Georgia for their willingness to schedule good out of conference, right? So not only do you have to play the West, but, they've played Texas in recent years. They've got some other good games coming up for LSU. So it's going to be a challenge. And I think personally that Brian Kelly did a great job raising Notre Dame up. But I think it was his decisions that kept them from taking that next final step. But we'll find out if some of the things he felt he couldn't do at Notre Dame, he'll be able to do at LSU.
Do you think so? So LSU fans, we tend to look at it as we have the most fertile recruiting soil in the country. I mean, there's a couple other schools who have a similar setup with, Georgia that has that, they kind of have to split that with Georgia Tech, and Ohio State, of course, gets Ohio, which maybe they'll have to split it with Cincinnati, but not really.
If it comes down to Ohio State and Cincinnati, kids are going to Ohio State. Same with Georgia.
Exactly. I don't think Cincinnati's ever actually beaten Ohio State for a recruit.
Kid they wanted,
and certainly nobody in Louisiana has ever beaten LSU for a recruit. So it's very fertile recruiting soil. What is the recruiting setup for Notre Dame? Because I'm going to be honest, people are bashing, saying it is a very tough school to recruit at, and he still did a good job recruiting. Is it tough to recruit at Notre Dame?
It's different. I mean, that's the thing is like, so what tends to happen with people that don't follow Notre Dame is they kind of look at it and say, well, Indiana's not exactly a fertile, like it's the exact opposite of what you just talked about. If you're recruiting for a basketball team, you want to be in Indiana. If you're trying to recruit for a football team, not so much, right?
Right.
And then the state to your east, Ohio, you can get kids from there, but it's tough to get a lot of those kids out of the state of Ohio. Notre Dame has to go national. Well, Notre Dame can go national, right? They went down to the state of Georgia and got Kyle Hamilton, right? I mean, so they're able to go get those kids. They went down to Louisiana and beat LSU for Jerry Tillery, who went on to become a first-round NFL draft pick, right?
I remember that.
They're able to do that because Notre Dame is different. And I've kind of disliked this mantra that it's hard to recruit at Notre Dame. Well, why? Well, the academics are tough. So there no good football players, no top 100 kids care about going to class or have good grades. That's not true.
Right.
We've seen plenty of kids like that. You have to present them with something that appeals to them. Because here's what every great recruit wants, whether he's a 4.0 student or a 2.5 student. I want to go get a chance to play for a championship. I want to be developed and be a top draft pick, right? And then a lot of kids want to get a good education. Now, not every kid cares about a Stanford Notre Dame education, but they will if the first two things are there, right? So if you can go to Notre Dame and win a championship, compete for a championship, and you can be a high draft pick, then you're going to go there. It's not a coincidence that as Notre Dame has made 2 of their last 3 playoff appearances, and they're starting to put more and more kids into the NFL draft. Last year, only Georgia and Alabama put more kids in the NFL draft than Notre Dame did, right? That wasn't the case when Brian Kelly got here. It was not even close to the case when Brian Kelly got here. then that all of a sudden Notre Dame becomes more attractive. And all of a sudden, these kids that actually do have the grades to get into Notre Dame aren't there. Because one of the misnomers about Notre Dame is people like to compare them to Stanford and Northwestern from an admission standpoint. It's not. Notre Dame does not have the same academic standards to get into Notre Dame as Stanford and Northwestern. Where the academic piece is harder at Notre Dame is it's harder to stay at Notre Dame and to do the work. Notre Dame requires more of their student athletes. That's the challenge. But there's been plenty of kids that say, hey, I can go there, I can play for this coach. And then you bring in Marcus Freeman and he just kind of crushes all those barriers. Hey, you can't recruit top players. Well, he went down to South Carolina, got Jalen Sneed. He went into Michigan's backyard and got Josh Burnham. They've gone down to Florida and gotten Keon Keeley. They went into Ohio and got Brendan Vernon, a 5-star defensive end, right? They went out to Arizona and got Benjamin Morris and beat Washington and Alabama for him. They went down to Florida. They've lost him now that Brian Kelly's decommitted, but they beat Bama in Florida for Devin Moore, right? All of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute, I didn't think you could recruit these type of athletes. That's what I keep being told. And of course, he put together what was one of the top 5 classes in the country until obviously they lost a kid here, and they're probably going to lose a couple more because Brian Kelly left. So but it's harder, right? It can be done, but it's harder. And I think that was one of the issues that Brian Kelly had is he didn't always want to personally be that grinder of a recruiter. He wanted his staff to kind of be that. The last year, he's improved in that regards. And I think that's also been a factor in Notre Dame being a better recruiting operation.
Interesting. And I was about to just touch on, sounds like you have a lot of respect for him as a recruiter, but that might be more of a newfound talent of his.
Well, I think here's what I'll say about Brian Kelly. And this is kind of the reason I've been a critic of Brian Kelly's for a long time. The reason is because he wasn't doing the work to recruit well. I've always felt that when Brian Kelly talks to recruits, it moves the needle. Right? It matters. He can impact kids because you're the head coach of Notre Dame. Brian Kelly, in the way that Brian Kelly presents himself, he got his start in politics. Like Brian Kelly can sit down with you and talk to you for 5 minutes, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy's sharp. He knows what's going on. It was his unwillingness to do that because as the head coach of Notre Dame, you're flying across the country talking to this booster club, you're talking to that booster club. Well, at LSU, I'm correct me if I'm wrong, okay, because I'm an outsider speaking here. I don't know if he has to fly to LA and DC and Boston and New York and Miami and Dallas and all those places to speak to LSU clubs, right? And booster clubs. I don't think that's the case, right?
Not often.
Quite as much. At Notre Dame, that's part of the gig. And so I think this is an opportunity, I think, for Brian Kelly that should allow him to get back to being just a football coach. Which I don't think he always juggled those two things incredibly well at Notre Dame. So if he's willing to put in the work, I think he'd be effective. He can be a closer, right? You don't have to be Dabo. You don't have to be what Urban Meyer was as a recruiter if you're a head coach. If you hire a great staff and you have a great plan and you serve as the closer and you step in whenever your staff needs you to, and maybe you take 4 or 5 just stud players to take an interest in, then you can put together a great effort. And that was my criticism of him. He's finally done it this past year. And lo and behold, prior to him leaving, Notre Dame has the number 4 recruiting class in the country.
Yeah. And I think that's shown dividends. So him as a football coach, one of the things a lot of fans said was most important is what kind of scheme, philosophy. They kind of wanted someone with coordinator experience. Of course, he hasn't been a coordinator in 30 some odd years, which hardly even counts at this point.
Well, he was a play caller at Cincinnati and Notre Dame early in his tenure. So even though he wasn't the coordinator, he was the play caller at Central Michigan. He was the play caller at Cincinnati, and he was the play caller his first 2 years at Notre Dame.
That's what I was going to get at. Yeah. Okay, so he has called plays. Did he call offense or defense?
Offense.
He's been an offensive play caller.
Yeah, see, he's actually been both. At the Division I level, he only called plays on offense, but he actually got his start as the defensive coordinator at Grand Valley State. And then he took over as the offensive coordinator later. So he actually called plays at Grand Valley State too. They had a 3-year stretch where they just had the best offense in college football. They won back-to-back national titles, averaging over 50 points a game. They would have won 3 titles in a row, but his starting quarterback, who played for the Lions for a while, Kurt Ains, got hurt in the quarterfinals of that first year. He came back and they won the next 2 titles. So, and that might have been his best team, the one that lost the championship game without their starting quarterback. So, and he called plays for that team. He called plays at Cincinnati in 2009. I think they finished that year, 4th in scoring offense that year. It was like 39.6 points, but at the time, 39.6 points is kind of like today, scoring like 43, 44. They finished 4th in scoring. He did it his first 2 years in Notre Dame, but again, I feel like there was just a little bit too much going on and he couldn't juggle it all. He also made a really bad hire for his offensive coordinator, because if you're going to be a play caller as a head coach, you need to make sure that you've got a really good coordinator. He didn't have that. At Notre Dame, he made a bad hire his first 2 years, and then he brought in Chuck Martin, and someone who was also won 2 championships at Grand Valley State after Brian Kelly left, and that made things a little better. He won't be calling plays at LSU. He's going to have his hand in the offense, though. Brian Kelly is utterly incapable of just completely turning the offense over to somebody. So, which is why he's trying to bring Tommy Rees with him to LSU.
Right, and I think that that's one of the concerns I've always had. One of the reasons I hated the Orgeron hire, which in a lot of ways Orgeron did prove me wrong, but he was married to a coordinator. You're always one bad coordinator hire away from 6-6 at all times under Orgeron. That's reality. That's what we saw the last 2 years. So it sounds to me like that's not the case with Brian Kelly. He can take an unexperienced coordinator, take him under his wing, and teach him how to coach.
I think so. I think for Brian Kelly and Jack Swarbrick talked about this today. Brian Kelly is much more of a CEO coach than maybe a guy that's just kind of getting his hands in the dirt every single day, right? I think that part of Brian Kelly is a thing of the past. It's what Brian Kelly's going to do. He's going to say, here's the vision that I have for what we're going to do. He's going to try to hire somebody to do it and put a staff together that can say, hey, look, here's what I expect. Here's the expectations that I expect of you, right? And so with any CEO coach, the key is, who do you hire? If you're a CEO coach and you don't make good hires, you're going to struggle. And that's been one of my issues with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame is he's made some great hires in recent years. Marcus Freeman was one, beating LSU for that. You talk about Mike Elston, who's done a great job at Notre Dame as the D-line coach. I mean, people talk about Notre Dame can't produce this. Notre Dame in 2018, when they played Clemson in the college football playoff, had a 5-man defensive end rotation. All 5 of them were drafted in the NFL. And that team also had Jerry Tillery, who was a first-round draft pick, right? So, they've been able to break some of those stereotypes, and he's made some good hires. Harry Heastan obviously was the best offensive line coach in college football for 5 years. Won a Joe Moore Award, produced more first-round draft picks than anybody. So there's been some really strong hires, but he's also had a couple that weren't good. Brian Van Gorder, bad hire. And then he kept on to Brian Van Gorder a little bit too long. So if Brian Kelly's going to be successful at LSU, that's going to be the key. If you're going to be a CEO head coach, you got to make sure that the people around you are good. And I don't think LSU is going to have a problem attracting good assistant coaches. He just has to pick the right ones. That's going to be the key.
Yeah. Well, and full disclosure, that word CEO is going to resonate a little bit with LSU fans. That was the term given to Coach Ed Orgeron, a little play on words there, but also, I mean, he truly was a CEO. The problem was he couldn't hire to save his life. He made one good hire during his time at LSU, and that was Joe Brady.
Wasn't he recommended by somebody else?
Joe Brady, he was recommended by Sean Payton of the Saints. And he came in for a camp, and it was pretty. So he went to more recommendations for these last 2 hires he brought in. He brought in rookie coordinators, and they were both just learning on the job, and it was a disaster because Ed Orgeron can't tutor a coordinator. He just can't. He doesn't do X's and O's. Everybody knew that from day one. Sounds to me like Brian Kelly can do that. What kind of offensive system does Brian Kelly run?
It'll be pro style. That he's kind of evolved in this last year. They're finally running some RPOs. They don't run a ton of them. It's a very pro style offense. It's a lot of horizontal stretch concepts. He's gone between, early in his career, he was more of a pin and pull guy, gap scheme type of stuff. In the last 6-7 years, really ever since he hired Harry Heastan in 2012, they've been more of a zone team, inside outside zone. Try to play power football, physical football. I mean, LSU experienced that in 2014, when Notre Dame came in and ran for, I think, what was like 264 on LSU that year in the Music City Bowl, just really big. But you got to think about what that offensive line had. I mean, they had Ronnie Stanley, who was a first-round pick. Michael McGlinchey started on that team. Nick Martin started on that team. He was a second-round pick. And then, so that's kind of been their MO is zone football. And I think when you look at LSU, one thing about recruiting Southern offensive linemen is you're going to tend to get bigger kids that can throw their weight around, where like Midwestern teams like Notre Dame tend to have like 6'6", 305. The occasional Quentin Nelson will come along who's 340 from Jersey, but a lot of those kids are more, 6'5". Liam Eichenberg was 6'6", 305, right? Robert Hainsey was 6'4", 295. He was a Pittsburgh kid. So they're athletic. They're guys that can, run outside zone, get to the second level, those type of things. And so that fits. And so last year, Notre Dame's top run play was outside zone because they were really athletic. At LSU, you can get away with being more power football because there's going to be a bigger, group of players to draw from that can be 315, that can be 320, that can be 325. So I think he'll adapt his run game to that regards, but he likes to throw the football. He likes to throw the football down the field. And his big thing is he hasn't been able to develop a quarterback at a high level. That's been the big complaint under Brian Kelly. And I know that's been a big complaint at LSU outside of one season. And I think that was kind of the big thing is, so if Brian Kelly can find himself a quarterback and if he can make good hires, he'll have a chance to be successful. Do I think he's a guy that can lead LSU to another championship? I'll be honest, I don't. But again, it's going to come down to if you find the right quarterback, you can win a championship in college football. I mean, because if I would have asked you in 2018, do you think Ed Orgeron can lead LSU to a national championship? I would imagine you probably would have had your doubts, right? Well, you made
it before 2019 or
in 2018. That's what I'm saying. Like in 2018, if I would have asked you that, you probably would have had some doubts, right?
Yeah.
Well, then he goes and hires Joe Brady, and Joe Brady turns because I had this argument with somebody at Notre Dame this summer, and they were talking about how, I kept using LSU as an example of why Notre Dame needs to open up their offense. And they're like, well, LSU had Joe Burrow and all the – I'm like, but nobody thought Joe Burrow was Joe Burrow when he threw 17 touchdown passes and 5 picks in 2018, right? When they averaged fewer points per game and fewer yards per game and fewer yards per attempt per game than Notre Dame did last year in 2020, right? It was you hired the right coach to say the talent's there. You've got to put that talent in position to go be successful. Joe Brady did that. And I think that's the key. And if Brian Kelly can find that quarterback – anybody can win if you have a great quarterback and a good coach. Right. Brian Kelly, at the very least, is a good coach. Well, we're going to find a very good coach. Well, we're going to find you don't go 54-9 in 5 years in Notre Dame. I don't care what the competition is if you're not a really good coach. What LSU is going to find out, and the rest of the world's going to find out, is he a great coach? That's the question that I think we're going to find out. Because a great coach is making the right hires, setting the right system, recruiting to your system. That's another thing. You can run whatever offense and defense you run, but can you recruit to that system? That's another question. And so those are the decisions that Brian Kelly's going to have to make, and we're going to find out if he can make those decisions. And if he does, then I'll be wrong, and I'll come back here and own it. But if he doesn't, if he makes some of the same mistakes that he made at Notre Dame, LSU is going to be good, but I don't know if they're going to be great. And that's how Notre Dame's been. Notre Dame's been good. They haven't been great. And that's why Brian Kelly has a losing record against top 10 opponents because they're good. They beat the teams they're supposed to. Like, what's going to happen if Brian Kelly has this thing? You're not going to lose to Troy again, right? You're not going to go out and lose to South Carolina, right? You're not going to lose to Missouri. The question is, can you beat Bama? Can you beat Georgia? That's going to be the question.
Well, and look, I'm gonna post something to you because one of the things I've been telling, but the problem with LSU is the consistency of the program. Losing to Bama actually isn't the problem. It's not like LSU goes 11-1 every year. It's losing to the teams you shouldn't. And what really strikes me during that 5-year stretch, undefeated against unranked teams. You've got 9 losses, 5 of them, if you include Cincinnati, which I'm just going to go ahead and include Cincinnati, 5 of them are teams that went on to playoffs because Cincinnati's well on their way. So to me, that would do pretty well for LSU. And of course, we don't know if he has the ability as a coach to break through that barrier and beat a Nick Saban team. We'll find out. We'll find out.
And that's been his. Brian Kelly said this after last year. He's like, we don't have a problem. We have a Clemson and an Alabama problem. That was Brian Kelly's comment, right? Well, it's deeper than that. It's also a Georgia problem and any other team ranked in the top 10. But that's the thing is, and he'll bring that stability. And the reason that is good at LSU, because at LSU, you may get that 1 year where you get that recruit or that one recruiting class where you have that receiving core that has Jamar Chase and Terrace Marshall and Justin Jefferson in the same class, right? And it's kind of funny looking at some of the comments about how Notre Dame has average skill talent. This is one of the most common misconceptions. The Notre Dame team that went to the playoff in 2018 had a pair of 6'4" receivers that ran 4.42s and went in the second and third round. They also have a tight end on the team went in the second round. You know what I mean? Like you look at right now, Notre Dame's got arguably the best tight end in college football, one of the best running backs in college football, and a lot of speed of receiver. So Brian Kelly knows what to do with that kind of speed. Notre Dame has had it, which is why they had a Michael Floyd, a Will Fuller, guys like that, Chase Claypool, Equanimous St. Brown, Miles Boykin, guys like that. It's can he put it all together? Because here's the big thing, the big complaint that I'll have about Brian Kelly. At some point in his career, he's had a championship operation everywhere. The problem is it hasn't always been at the same time. And that's what he's going to have to find. So, like in 2015, Notre Dame had a national championship caliber offense. They had 3 first-round picks on the offensive line and a second-round pick. They had Will Fuller. They had CJ Prosise at running back. You had Deshaun Kaiser at quarterback, second-round pick. And you had an offense that could just go out and score. I mean, they took Clemson down to the wire. They took Ohio State, was a 28-21 game in the second half. They took a Clemson team that finished in the top 5 with Christian McCaffrey, took a go-ahead lead with 30 seconds left in the game, ended up losing because of he didn't have the defense where it needed to be because of Brian Van Gorder. Now the last 3 years, they've had a championship caliber defense, but the offense hasn't been where it needed to be. And so the key for Brian Kelly is being able to figure out from a staff standpoint and a recruiting operation standpoint of just the overall operation and what your plan is, can you put those two things together at the same time? If he's able to do that at LSU, then he'll be able to prove me wrong and win a championship. If he doesn't, and he can, because I can only go by what I've seen, right? Mm-hmm. Preston, I mean, I can't assume he's going to do something at LSU that he didn't do in 12 years in Notre Dame, right? And it's not about you can or can't win. It's just about, did you make the right choices? That's what it boils down to. And if he can do that, then I'll be wrong. If he doesn't do that, then I'm going to be right, and we'll find out.
Yeah, and Brian, I'm going to ask a question, kind of, and it might be a little too simple terms for someone who has an immense understanding of the sport, such as you do. By the way, you're very popular in the comments. I don't know if you've noticed.
Not so much.
Well, no,
let's see here. This dude is biased and delusional. It's biased and delusional, but still. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're just so biased. And by the way, I'm not seeing any bias coming out at all. And you know, but anyways, no, most of the people have been really nice. And for the internet, this is extraordinary to get more than one compliment in one show. I don't know if you caught, one of the guys actually commented this guy should replace Panamsky. Panamsky was Coach O's personal PR guy at LSU. Oh, no. He was a radio guy that Ogeron brought on with him. So look, if you're looking for a gig, man, LSU has a history. I'm sure.
I kind of like where I'm at. I kind of like doing what I'm doing at Irish Breakdown. But hey, Preston, I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a lot of fun. So
it has been a lot of fun. Do me a favor before I get you off here. Mm-hmm. Tell the people where they can follow you and keep up with your work. I have a good feeling a few of them will do that.
You can find me obviously on my YouTube channel is at Irish Breakdown. And then my website, I try to keep it simple, irishbreakdown.com. So we have a website affiliated with Sports Illustrated, Fan Nation. And of course we have our YouTube channel, which you can find, just type in Irish Breakdown. I try to make it easy. I got like merchandise all over, right? I got all that kind of stuff. I try to make it easy for you, but irishbreakdown.com is where you can find us on the website. And then Irish Breakdown is also our YouTube channel.
Thank you. You have an excellent night. I appreciate every moment of you tonight. That was Brian Driscoll, incredibly knowledgeable, former football coach, great personality, publisher for Sports Illustrated Notre Dame there. Y'all, he just told you everything you need to know about Brian Kelly, the pros, the cons. He did ultimately predict Brian Kelly won't win a championship at LSU. And of course, a lot of that is predicated on the basis of he didn't necessarily think LSU had ample more resources than Notre Dame did. And he broke down how Notre Dame has had some elite talent here and there and all that good stuff. Now, I do disagree because I do think Notre Dame's got elite talent. But I think LSU, the amount of talent it has available to its disposal is just extraordinary. And I think Brian Kelly very well will bring a championship to LSU. It might take a few years, but I'm going to predict this. Before Walker Howard, let's put it like this. Before the 2023 class is done playing for LSU, I think Brian Kelly will have won a championship at LSU. That's just my prediction. Is it bold? Sure. Is it Homer? Go ahead. Eat me alive. I don't care. But that's just what I see happening. So I'm very thankful for him coming on, giving a great breakdown. I'm also very thankful for our sponsor tonight, Tremonti's Meat and Seafood. We have their signature single barrel Heaven's Door straight bourbon whiskey. This is the staff select, meaning they came into the store, had samples taken, all the staff, and they selected this as the best whiskey of the year. They have a limited supply available at Tremonti's. So y'all go visit them off of the corner of Old Jefferson by Parkview Baptist. We're going to hear from them real quick. I'm going to get to a few more comments, and y'all don't forget, stick around. Mike Scarborough, Buddy Sonji coming on as soon as I'm done. Will they be as intelligent as Brian? Absolutely not, but they're still entertaining.
Tremonti's has meat. Tremonti's has seafood. Tremonti's has much more. Tailgating and home gating platters. Huge wine and liquor selection. Beer and all the spices you need. Chairman Reserve and Wagyu meats. Ribeye rolls, shrimp rolls, kebabs. 20 flavors of sausage for the grill. Daily lunch specials and game processing. On-site catering also available. Good meat ain't cheap and cheap meat ain't good. Visit Tremonti's.com.
Mark Cumby, dang, why are you on while Blake is on? I missed too much. Mark, guys, if you missed any bit of that Brian interview, you're going to need to go back and rewatch it. Brian was exceptionally knowledgeable and gave you all the information about Brian Kelly. I am going to try to bring him on this show again, but you're good. I mean, I could seriously listen to the guy talk for days. That's how knowledgeable he is. Very rare you're going to find a guy like that who tells it like it is. So yes, scheduling issues. Mike and Buddy had to do their show tonight too. And with the LSU coaching search being as hot as it is, it probably works out for the best anyway. Let's see here. I live in Lafayette. Kelly is on another level than Napier. Ultimate Warrior, you're 100% right. I totally agree. I think Napier's a good coach. I think Brian Kelly is one of the handful of great coaches. Of course, Brian did have some legitimate criticisms, and he said he's a very good coach. Is he a great coach? Because that's what he's going to have to be at LSU. He criticized some of his hiring decisions. He criticized some other, like recruiting issues, saying only very recently has he been hyper involved with recruiting. So we'll see. We'll see. He knew all the ins and outs. He's been covering them for 12 years. So, I think after 12 years, you're going to find some things to criticize about a coach, but ultimately I think LSU should be very happy because I think what Brian might have missed is the coaches at LSU over the last few years haven't been very great coaches or very good coaches. They've been okay. Like Orgeron's elite world-class recruiter. Does he know how to develop that talent? We didn't really see him do it, truth be told. You realize Notre Dame is number 5 in the nation, right? Yeah, I mean, that's highly. I mean, look, man, 54-9. 5 of those losses are to playoff teams, man. I can't hate on it. Can't hate on it. I do think my thing is Les Miles and Ed Orgeron can get the talent to beat Nick Saban and win national titles, then I think Brian Kelly will be able to do it. I really do. Let's see here. Former coach knows it's all okay. Good show, Preston. That's Rick Kelly, brother of Brian Kelly. They talk about Chip, they talk about Brian, but they don't talk about Rick. Just kidding. Let's see here. Oh man, we got so many comments coming in. I can't even keep up. Let's see here. You don't have to be a great coach to win. There's enough talent. That's the thing. The thing that stands out to me, 0 losses to ranked teams, to unranked teams. Let's see here. Let's see. One last comment I'm going to get to here. Palermo Trappini. I understand that LSU has recruited since 2007 when Saban got to Bama an average of 6.5247 composite. That's miles mostly. Well, look, yeah, LSU, yeah, 6.5. That's about right. Right outside the top 5. A few down years, the outliers that really dragged that down. And to be quite frank, if you're recruiting well at LSU, you're going to get some superb talent. So I think LSU is going to be able to do big things under Brian Kelly. We'll have a long off season to discuss it. If you're watching the show tonight, I want to really thank you for watching. Don't go anywhere because Mike and Brian, Mike and Buddy are coming on. Like I said, probably won't be as smart as Brian was, but They're there. They're entertaining. They do their best, but do me a favor. They've been kicking my butt on views and they've been kicking my butt on likes. If you're here, hit that like, hit that share. Please help me out. Y'all have a great night. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We're a growing channel. We're almost at 10,000 subscribers. It seems like just the other day we hit 9,000. So if you're watching the channel for the first time, make sure to go hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our content. I'm live every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. Tonight we did an early edition. Mike is live with Buddy every Wednesday at 8 o'clock. And of course, we do all of our post-game shows. I appreciate it. Y'all have an incredible night and go Tigers.